Hello, everyone. Welcome wherever you are. I understand it's a very international audience. Very glad to be here again with Fons. You will understand from my accent, I am French and never try to hide that. We know each other with Fons from my Dutch years when I was a student in Holland, and then after carried on with some further activities of working and studying in the US, in Canada, and in Russia for quite a few years. And I'm calling you today from snowy Czech Republic. We're having about an inch of snow since yesterday, and it's very pleasant. So winter has come.
Yeah,
Voilà.
yeah, oh,
So over to
yeah,
you, Fons. Voilà. And so I'm
good.
very glad to be here to assist Fons to talk about this project research on the COVID and culture.
Good. Thank you so much, Jérôme. Pleasure to work with you. Fons Tromperaars. I've been in the field of multiculturalism for quite some years. After my economics degree, did a PhD on the effect of national culture on corporate culture. And I'm saying this because this is an example of a research we did while being locked down at home and say, what the hell are we going to do? So Jérôme and I and some other authors of the new book we wrote in a couple of months based on empirical research, and we'll show you all the results as far as we are now in terms of how do different cultures approach the pandemic differently with less or more success. I will start with a short introduction about generically our philosophy and the way we approach things, which is a bit beyond just showing that there are differences. We know that by now, but it's time that we do something with the differences. And that's something that we will do for about 20 minutes. And then we'll go into the 7 dilemmas that we have found created by the pandemic and how different cultures, all sharing the same dilemmas, have approached those dilemmas quite significantly differently. And Jérôme will follow time and again with examples of different parts of the world, being the Czech Republic, France, or what have you, in terms of, hey, this is an example of the more generic type of conclusions I'm trying to draw. That's a bit the idea. You will get also a chance to ask questions, not only in the chat box, but at the very end. Now, we're very keen on questions. So let's start so we have time to discuss also what this does for you. Now, let me start generically. The world is getting more diverse, not so much in actual diversity. There always have been Japanese and there always have been Americans, and unfortunately, there always have been French people. Um, as Jérôme knows very well, I'm half French myself, so I know it from the inside. Now, I'm saying this because there always have been males and females. There always have been whatever diversity you find today, but we have organized ourselves quite differently. Suddenly you find Japanese in New York, you find Americans in Paris. And, you know, I live in Amsterdam, and 53% of people living in Amsterdam don't have Dutch parents. So the diversity is the same, but we have now mixed it. Our experience of diversity has changed dramatically. And what is the big challenge of today is two weaknesses in our current approach. First of all, our models are culturally biased. A simple example, leadership literature written by Americans, you smell America. Written by a French author, you smell France. And written by a Chinese author, you smell China. However, if you have a multicultural team, which book will you read? The American, the French, or the Chinese? We need a new book because some leadership models tell you leadership is about giving people direction within a vision, top down, and other leadership literature in Sweden, no, you have to listen to your people, involve them. Yeah, and both have parts of the truth. But if you're sitting in a table with a multicultural team, you have a Swede, a Nigerian, an American, French person at the table, what leadership model would you apply? And what we are saying, there is a leadership model that works in every culture, and we'll talk about that. That's one. The other big problem is that most of our models are bipolar. And what do we mean with bipolar? It's based on mutually exclusive thinking. So let's take Myers-Briggs. If you score high on thinking, you score low on feeling. If you take MBA stuff, if you're centralized, you're not decentralized. And bipolar thinking is not very handy in dealing with what to do with cultural diversity into innovation, into higher performance. No, even our cultural models, and most of these models suck, as you know, because they're bipolar. If you score high on individualism, you score low on collectivism. Now, what a bloody nonsense. Why? Because I met my wonderful colleague Charles Hamden Turner, and Charles said, Fons, I read your thesis because I didn't exclude myself in this group of stupid bipolar thinkers. And he said, Fons, if you score high on individualism at the cost of society and the collectivity, your individualism becomes egoism and it doesn't work. If you are a collectivity at the cost of the individual, you're a communist and it doesn't work. So if both ends of your scale don't work, why don't you try to combine them? And you can apply this to Myers-Briggs. If you're only thinking without feeling, you're a robot. And if you're feeling without thinking, you're a neurotic. And I have good news for you, both don't work. So the art is in combining these opposites. And we need other models, other surveys. Everything needs to change if we want to deal effectively with diversity. Now, that's called dilemma reconciliation. So let's follow what Einstein said, and let me try to, the biggest problem is now arriving, namely, does this work? And at least it seems to work on my screen. Jérôme, is it working? Yeah, good.
Perfect.
So we do the intercultural analysis of dilemmas related to the coronaviruses and how to manage them. Now, Einstein said an interesting thing. You can't solve a problem at the same level it was created. So if we have a European financial crisis, as an example, we ask the Germans to solve it, right? Now, that's not exactly what Einstein meant. Einstein meant that you need the world to solve it. You need to go one level higher. And what are ways of doing it? Innovation, sustainability, globalization, and leadership. Let me connect those in one sentence. Globalization leads to different viewpoints, of which is the essential role of a leader to connect, which is another word for innovation, connecting opposites, that leads to sustainable results. Now, that was a German sentence, but you get it. It's all about recognizing diversity around you, connecting those opposites, which leads to innovative results that then goes into sustainable end results. Now, this is our basic principle of where we want to go. And let me give you the alternative. So if you have a model that is bipolar, you measure how close are you to being a rectangle, or how close are you to be an ellipse? And what we want to teach you is there is a reality beyond. Namely, if you realize that these are shadows of a cylinder, which just includes the ellipse and the rectangle, you're in the realm where we want you to be. And the spiral is showing that it's not going by a straight line, but it's a bit like skating or dancing between the opposites. So great individuals take care of society, and great societies take care of the individual. but then you need to be a cylinder. And that is our basic alternative to cultural bias and bipolarity, because the cylinder is human, the rectangle is German, and the ellipse is French. So, and the beauty is, both parts of being French and parts of being German is enriching humanity on a higher level. Now, let's take a wonderful definition by my colleague Charles Hamlin Turner, because the end result of dilemma reconciliation, combining opposites into a synthesis, another word for that is innovation. Innovation is combining values that are not easily joined, therefore scarce, therefore profitable. So if you take Apple, Apple has combined values that are difficult to unite: aesthetics and functionality. And it's not only and, no, what is beautiful has a function. So if you take the iPhone or an iPad, the beauty of an iPad is the shape. For example, the glass plate has no frame. But because it has no frame, you don't break your nails while swiping it. So beauty becomes functional. If you take Formula One, the big dilemma in Formula One is speed and safety. And every engineer in Formula One says, how can I use the speed to make the car more safe? And that's called downforce. So you have aerodynamics that takes care of the faster you go, the more downforce you have. Very interesting. So the end result of combining values on a higher level without compromising them is what we are about, and why we are giving you this introduction, because we want to show you applications of this in how different cultures have fought with the virus. Leadership, very important in this discussion as well. The essence of leadership is to distinguish a problem from a dilemma. And when it's a dilemma, you take the right questions to approach it. So if you say, hey, we have a dilemma in our company, global versus local, a manager would say, are we local or are we global? A leader would say, what can we do locally to make the company more global? And what can we globally to better localize and be more intimate with our local customer? That's leadership. So you see that dilemma reconciliation and our alternative way of approaching issues is very powerful. Final point on this, the latest research of Dave Ulrich, he interviewed 800 HR managers, and out of the research came the top 3 of HR initiatives that we need to take in the future. Number 3, talent management. Number 2, linking HR to strategy, business strategy. And number 1, and I must say I was surprised myself, but finally it's there, paradox navigation. Wow, paradox navigation. And we are still quoting all these bipolar models. And have you seen this model on cultural diversity? Oh my God, it's so old-fashioned. It's a good intermediate step, but we need to take a step beyond. Now, what are the dilemmas? And we're getting now into the coronavirus. What are the dilemmas that we found out of 22 that have top scores and that we would like to discuss with you? And let me do as if I'm a young man. We need to comply with regulations versus flexibility. We need to be tough and we need to be fair to our staff, at rapport and report. We need to protect our staff for their private life, and we need obviously to motivate them to work even harder in the crisis. Face-to-face versus digital, obviously a big one. Getting the task done versus respect roles and responsibilities. We need to survive by following our strategic goals versus going for sustainability. And for example, one goal could be health, and sustainability could be the economy, or vice versa. Because one meta dilemma overarching all this is the economy versus health as a big dilemma. We need to go back to work in the office. We have assured that staff should not be afraid to get there. Now, we have measured how different cultures not only have experienced those dilemmas, but have approached those. And let me give you a method that we used. We first, in our research, looked at the recognition of these opposites. And we linked it to our cultural model. Some more about that in a second. Then help people respect both sides, otherwise it's not a dilemma. A dilemma are two positives, therefore respectful for opposites, that lead to a dilemma that in the third step you need to reconcile. And then what can we do to realize the end result? Now, a little model of culture we use at Shine because it's one of the most sophisticated writers, at least on corporate culture, but in general, his model of culture is very appealing. He said, culture is multi-layered. On the outside, we have explicit culture. It's the culture we see in their expressions, the language we speak, the food we eat, in a nutshell, our behavior. But be careful, this explicit culture hides a deeper level of norms and values. When the value becomes a norm, in other words, what we like to do is also what we should do, it slips out of consciousness and becomes a basic assumption. Little example, we have a value called oxygen, and breathing has become a norm. When what we like, oxygen, has become a norm of breathing, it slips out of consciousness. You don't think about breathing every 5 to 10 seconds, except those who smoke. And this is called implicit culture. Implicit culture, you can't see it, you can't smell it, but it's there. And we have distinguished in our research 3 levels, making up 7 dimensions. So in a nutshell, culture is a dynamic process of solving human problems. If you like, dilemmas. The dilemmas are shared, but we approach them differently in order to solve them. And that is in the area of human relationship. We distinguish 5 areas, then time and nature. Now, let's go for the first one. We're almost done with the introduction, but I wanted to give you this new way of thinking because otherwise the applications to the pandemic are not very clear. To show you one of the research elements we have used over the last 40 years. I started my research in 1979. In fact, the empirical part in 1980. So it is indeed 40 years ago. And this was one of the questions we asked at Shell in 10 refineries. And we asked the following question. You're riding in a car driven by a close friend of yours. Your friend is speeding 50 kilometers or miles an hour where you're allowed to go 30. And your friend hits a pedestrian. You come to court and the lawyer of your friend says, don't worry, you're the only witness. 2 questions. 1, what is the right of your friend to expect you to testify to the lower figure, to help you by lying? My friend has a definite right, some right, no right. Now, before engage, by the way, the second question is, would you lie or not? Now, before engaging you in a little case, who would like to be in this situation? Now, we don't have a lot of time to look at your answers, but believe me, I've done this often enough to know that there is hardly anybody in the audience who said, that's a nice situation to be in. Why? Because regardless of where you're from India, from the US, from Europe, people tend to say, this is a dilemma. Why? We all want to help friends and we all have something with the truth. But it is in the approach to the dilemma that you find the differences. Now, what is this dilemma? This dilemma is universalism versus particularism. Let me explain. A universalistic culture, those who believe my friend has no right or some right, but I will not help, are those cultures that believe in consistency, systems, standards, and rules, uniform procedures. They love transparency, this other nice little uh, fashion. You need to be transparent. So we in the Netherlands say, oh, you're ugly, really ugly because you don't have your makeup today. What? Yeah, transparency, new fashion. That is called universalism. Particularism is be flexible, be pragmatic, it depends. And those are the people who ask, what happened to the pedestrian? And the best question I ever had was in Italian, what happened to the car? Because my answer will depend on the particular situation. There is no universal truth. Now, we recognize this, the Germans, Nordic, Protestant Europe, America is more universalistic on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, we find the particularist, Italy, most of Asia. Now, what is better? Now, if we meet each other, we better reconcile. Now, companies have struggled with this, and they have introduced integrity as a value. And why I like the integrity value is because if you put it in front of a multicultural group and you say, how does integrity help you to give the correct answer to the car accident question, right? This one, then the American would say, oh, but then if you have integrity, it's answer C, because people with integrity would never lie. And the Koreans would say, but sorry, John, I disagree. How can you have integrity if you don't help your friend? So they go rather for answer A. So why I use this integrity example, because integrity is the essence of dilemma reconciliation. If you look at the best version of the etymological root of the word integrity, integrity is creating wholeness through the integration of opposites. And that's what I learned in Japan. In Japan, they said what we would do in Japan is we would test the strength of our friendship by convincing our friend to tell the truth in court, him or herself. Say, wow. So we can talk to the judge to lower the sentence for his courage. Here we are. Now, we see here quite, we have 144 countries in our database, but we have picked out some. So you see that Switzerland, Germany, United States, Canada are in the Protestant high 80s and 90s. And you go at the bottom, and you see Argentina, Mozambique. Now I make the swap to what does this mean for the coronavirus and its approach. Let me give you, for example, one dilemma we found in researching the dilemmas that all the countries have raised when they talked about the coronavirus and the pandemic approach. And that is, on the one hand, we need a standardized approach, one vaccine, or do we go for the unique patient? Every patient is in a different stage, and obviously both are beautiful, because standardization leads to mass production. It's cheaper, while a unique patient, namely the differentiation, for example, between old and young people, you're unique and you have to treat older people. Giving a vaccine earlier than the younger people is particularistic. Yeah. Now, have a look at the extreme. So on the vertical axis, you see we need a standardized approach with the risk of one size fits all. If you go for the unique patient and you treat everybody differently, you have the unaffordable customized medicine. And you see here that they are cynical, because one size fits all doesn't sound very attractive and the unaffordable customized medicine doesn't. Why? If you have a dilemma and you choose one side or the other, it should not be attractive. Neither should be the compromise. And the compromise is, let's go for the untested vaccines. I saw a nice little cartoon this morning, and two mice were talking to each other, and one mouse said to the other mouse, gee, before I take the vaccine, let's wait for the results for humanity. That's the untested vaccine. Now, if we take the reconciliation, that's what we have learned from international business, is that you need to continuously learn from the best particularistic practices. In other words, we need tests in different groups. And that's why AstraZeneca had such a problem, is because they made a mistake in the testing. You will see that the best way to test is have a variety of audiences. So you can take the particular cases and then try to learn from those particular cases, which could help in other cases. And then we have another one. Yeah,
Maybe,
please, Jérôme. I was
yes,
almost trying to invite you after the next dilemma, but please go ahead,
I
Jérôme.
think if you can go back to the previous slide,
Yes, sure, sure,
I
sure.
just wanted to introduce like that some idea, because what you said about the vaccines is spot on. Today, globalization, which brought the virus as a world pandemic, has also been the answer to this pandemic, because we are now everywhere talking about a matter of weeks to get a vaccine. And that's precisely somehow, despite all the shortcomings of everybody's government, everybody's annoyed against government, nevertheless, scientists have managed to learn from the past mistakes. And it's fantastic how we've got in a year, basically, a vaccine, many vaccines available around the world that, as you said, have been tested locally. And that's an interesting reconciliation, because the earlier history of vaccines, you had one company making vaccinations and testing in its own community, which were not necessarily working in another community. And today, we're able to have multinational companies who are having testing in all kind of communities in order to bring the best result centrally. This is an interesting case. Uh, but I can also bring another example more close to business. And when we've got the one size fits all, this actually illustrates this standardization, the universalism, as you said, and this sort of customized medicine is a typical case of particularism, which we all like to have when we go see our general practitioner. We want the general practitioner to give us the exact answer to our disease, not just some generics and so on. This is often an issue. And in business, it's the same, because in business, we have global companies who strive to create some unique products that they can flood in the market. And we got the same countries that you've talked about. This Protestant cluster has a lot of companies with global brands. I'm thinking in terms of fashion, maybe from CNA in the Netherlands, and we've got I don't know, H&M in Sweden, and IKEA in Sweden, and so on. And this is very interesting, because there is a little case I like very much, which is in the country I'm living in now, in the Czech Republic, with a relatively small company that is distributing some 3D printer machines. And this is very interesting, because industry recently has been really changing its process. We always had some machines to make prototypes, but it used to be super expensive. And now you can buy for $500 or less a 3D printer and make a unique piece, a unique sort of prototype at a very affordable cost. And so we got those guys. They're called Prusa. It's a founder's name, who has those machines that they sell. And by definition, a 3D printer, it is a customized machine. I mean, it's a machine to make customized product. And when the COVID crisis hit the country here in March, almost immediately they decided to help, or they connected with some people in a local hospital, a research hospital nearby, with people at the ministry, and they started to design 3D printing some face shield, like it's in hard plastic with some sort of a transparency in front. And so they were able very quickly to make some tests, to send them directly to the hospital. The guys would test it and would give feedback. And then and so we are really here trying to reconcile the regulations because they were really trying to keep it according to some safety measures and the speed because there was a pandemic. And when at one point one product was satisfying, they plugged all the machines they had in stocks. They plugged them in series and they started to mass produce some face shield that they were distributing just in time to the hospitals. And so in a matter of few weeks, they managed to make tens of thousands of face shield, which would have taken too much time to produce elsewhere in a mass production perspective. And on the other hand, they opened some sort of a special fund to ask people to chip in to participate because they were doing it for free. But it was probably a very good promotion for that. So there are like that some interesting examples reconciling those two dilemmas. Voilà.
Very, very good, Jérôme. Thank you so much. And we will hear much more of Jérôme with the examples in the coming presentation. Another dilemma is to comply with regulations versus the need to be more flexible. So you see that in some cultures, the dilemma is the same, but universalistic cultures would start with regulations, while flexibility is perhaps more Latin. The dilemma is the same, but all cultures need to combine. And let me give you this, do we want to follow rules and comply? Or do we want to adapt quickly to circumstances and be flexible? So I think the end result obviously is called agility, because agility is that combination. The idea of dilemmas is that you crack the line, and we have looked at how do different cultures react on the questions related to compliance versus flexibility. And that's interesting. By the way, we have done this with all 7 dimensions and with all 7 pandemic dilemmas. And look at this picture. You see China, Korea, Singapore are very much combining flexibility with compliance in their own way. By the way, in their own way, quite different from the Western world. They start to comply knowing that if they were very disciplined, they would get flexibility back very soon. So dilemma reconciliation is also done in time. Switzerland was quite interesting. They scored low on both, but Switzerland, although we had for every country at least 100 people, is moving up and down the charts everywhere. But we look at a bit of compromise in the middle. We see Brazil and South Africa in quite low scores. By the way, in a nutshell, we have done correlational analysis, and with all 7 dilemmas, there is a negative correlation between the degree of reconciliation, in other words, going top right-hand corner, and the number of excess death. In other words, a very high correlation with the degree to which you reconcile and the success of treating the pandemic. That is something, you know, so Ulrich might be right intuitively that paradox navigation is important. And it's more than navigation, it's really reconciliation. Let's take the other of the 7. Do you go for the individual or the group? The most common, let's say, cultural dimension. Are you individualistic or rather group-oriented? And we have asked question in our research for 140,000 people. What is the best guarantee to increase the quality of one's life? Give people as much freedom as possible and the opportunity to develop oneself? Or no, you have to continuously take care after each other, and then the quality of life for us all will improve, even if it obstructs individual freedom. So you gather that answer A is individualistic and answer B is communitarian, to show you that it's not only your passport, but also age. In our 140,000 people, we see that the young people are much more individualistic than the older people. And to be honest, just observing how they treat the rules of the pandemic, I see that a lot of young people say, yeah, nice this group solidarity, but not for me, because I'm healthy and the chance that I get seriously ill is much lower. Older people are much more concerned with the group, and apparently, according to our research, that's worldwide. Now, what is the dilemma? And I ask you again, Jerome, to
Yeah.
see if you can give some other examples. We have tested this, and have a look at this chart. So, adjusting behavior for others is on the group side vertically, horizontally, taking individual accountability. Yeah, and it's interesting that some cultures, like Sweden, has really bet on this reconciliation, and that is by giving people individual accountability, because they're a fairly individualistic culture. By taking individual accountability, part of that accountability is to take care of the group. And in the beginning, they have been quite successful. Now they're struggling. Again, the top scores, as you can find, are again in China. Germany scores very high, South Korea, Singapore. Very low scores, South Africa, Brazil. I don't think it needs a lot of stuff, but um, co-opetition, namely that you individually compete to better cooperate, and you cooperate to better individually compete, is what we need to go for. Jerome, any remarks you want to make here?
Yeah, there's. I mean, actually, what is really interesting is the combination of those two dilemmas, because dilemmas are dilemmas amongst themselves. We also hesitate sometimes to our preferred behavior. And what we found surprising in the answers is that countries that were, for instance, not scoring traditionally very high in universalism, so following the rules because
Yeah.
we believe it's supposed to be done, we found almost everywhere in the world, especially in the first wave, because this study is mostly done about the spring, that actually almost everywhere people spontaneously kind of follow the rules. And probably that's one of the questions that we also ask ourselves. Probably the answer is with this dilemma with communitarism, because on the one hand, maybe you are not used to change your behavior because it's the rule, but how much are you ready to change your behavior because of the group? And obviously, when you look at the countries that are scoring high, there are also countries that are high in the group orientation. Uh, and we've got among the countries that are scoring low, and I wanted also to comment on the previous slide about the age, where we've seen around the world, in Florida in spring, but also in Italy recently, in France, and so on, some
Australia?
demonstrations, Australia, people demonstrating, saying, yes, we want to go able to party and so on. And somehow it is often presented in the media as some sort of a generation gap. After the other dilemma that is often presented with this group versus individual is the question of human rights, because in places where people are naturally more individualistic, comes spontaneously the question of, yes, but how much the governments can oblige people to do things in cultures where collectivism is more natural, more expected. I don't like to use natural when we talk about culture. Is more expected. This is accepted as such, whereas in more individualistic cultures, there is also this idea saying, well, it's not so much that I'm selfish, but we've got some rules that actually individuals are supposed to have their free, I would say, free minds, free will, and obliging groups of people to do that. And there will be, this is pending because right now everybody's waiting for the vaccines as the sort of new messiah arriving. But ready to bet anything that in a few months, when vaccines will be available, will come a new discussion about how much we can force people to get vaccinated. And the same dilemma will reappear.
Oh, very, very much. Thanks for that update, Jérôme. By the way, the scores here are scores that are really part of an update we did in September, because we started with 12 countries. Now it's 22. In fact, the next update will come in soon, where we have especially a lot of more Latin American data. Cutting a long story short, you see that by reconciling opposites, you are more effective than only choosing for the individual or the group. Perhaps, Magda, are there any questions coming in the chat box? Because perhaps this is the moment to pause for half a minute and see if there are people who lost us because we
No,
go
no
so
one's losing you. I think all of us are just paying attention and yeah, keep going.
We do. Thank you. And again, there are moments at the end where we will give you all the time to discuss the result of whatever question you have. This is co-opetition that I mentioned at the very end.
Jérôme, did Fons freeze for you as well, or is it just for me?
No, he's frozen for me too. Yes.
Okay, cool.
Almost feel good, like not my fault.
So, it's a good feeling, right? Okay.
Well, I hope he'll be back. I can maybe carry on. I mean, he's got the slides, so I can't really move that. But yes, neutral affective was actually a very important dilemma because how much do we expect, for instance, to create awareness without, on the one hand, panicking the population, or without lacking or with lacking some empathy. And we have here some different style of leaderships, precisely, with, on the one hand, some territories where the information were precisely announced by some teams of specialists with a certain distance in the in the emotions that would be communicated, and other countries, other territories where we have, for instance, the heads of states who stepped in, and here I'll recall President of France, Macron, who said, "We are at war," which is like extremely can't go more emotional than that, and plenty of other cases. If you think of at the beginning of the crisis, the president of Brazil, who was also displaying his good health and so on, or the president of Belarus, Mr. Lukashenko, who said there is no virus here, so we are doing very well. All that actually shows this dilemma. Welcome back, Fons. I stepped in your shoes, in your clogs.
I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. Suddenly I was out, which is for the delight of many participants. Yeah.
So I stepped in your wooden shoes, and
yeah.
So I was just talking about you got frozen when entering the emotions. So I talked about the various heads of states who stepped in to say that whether the virus was an enemy or did not exist in the territory.
Very,
Over
very.
to you.
Yeah, good. Let me go back to the slideshow if we can, to connect again to the presentation. Here we are. Good. So if we follow scientific insights, IQ, then, and it's an interesting little story in the Netherlands, you are right, but you don't get it. Namely, in the beginning of the pandemic, there were a lot of discussions, and by the way, ongoing discussions, should we allow young people to go to school? Because, you know, the infection rate is lower and the illness is bearable. And they decided, yes, go to school. And then emotionally, the teachers and the parents of the kids were very annoyed. Oh, what are you doing to, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, with IQ and EQ always wins. So scientifically, they could show it was best to do this, but emotions got the overhand. Now, if you only go for the emotions, you are wrong, but you get it. And I don't mean the virus only, but emotions dominate. And so both are not very popular. So what has been done is to say, okay, we will not send the children to school, but we will test the new knowledge time and again. You know, according to Kuhn, the theory is made to be refuted, but also positively, it is to get increasing insight in what is going on. And now children are going to school again. That was the IQ and EQ. My favorite one is specific versus diffuse. And I'll give you some time, obviously, Jérôme, but let me explain what is specific and diffuse across cultures. A specific culture is analytic. The diffuse cultures take the big picture. And we have pictured that by Kurt Lewin's model of the U-type and the G-type. Kurt Lewin was a German going to America, and he says, Americans are amazing people. They are like peaches, because a peach has a tough nut in the center and a very accessible flesh on the outside. We Germans are tough on the outside, but once we're in, you're in. And the U-type is where the privacy is small and the public life is big. Examples, the refrigerator, the car is all public. In America, you need my car, take my car. You move, you leave your furniture, is public use. Now, according to Lewin, this leads to a specific relationship. Specific relationship is, cut the crap, what is this about? When I got my PhD, they called me in the university Dr. Tromperaars, but at the barbecue to celebrate my PhD, it was Fons, same people. Because a title in America is a specific label for a specific job. Well, if you go to the opposite, the Herr Doctor German, big privacy, small public life. So initially, there is no relationship. You're Sie and not Du. But in October, Munich, this is what happens. You share everything. And even your wife is called Frau Doctor if you are Herr Doctor. Now, the big problem internationally is when the peach meets the coconut. Namely, what is private and what is public? The point of the arrow is the danger zone. So for Americans, you may discuss something in a meeting, which for the Germans or the Asians is called loss of faith. You don't discuss that, you do that at the table before. Now, so you see that the analytic cultures, let's say Australia, in Europe, the northern part of Europe, versus diffuse, most of Asia, Latin cultures, African cultures, you take a lot personal. Now, what does this mean in terms of measuring it? We ask people, would you paint the house of your boss? Answer A, dear boss, go to hell. He's the boss in the company, not outside. That's specific, even being boss. Diffuse is, yeah, it's my boss, I need to help him everywhere. Have a look. These are the people who would not paint the house of the boss. So you see that the Dutch and Sweden are very specific, don't paint the house of the boss. But you go to India, China, it's my boss, I need to paint. Now, a very disappointing score, footnote, is Japan, okay? Because I would have expected Japan to be much more diffuse than they show. And we interviewed the Japanese who told us our option is not on the list. In Japan, we would never wait till the boss asks. Now, Japan scores 63%. You see close to New Zealand and Australia. Quite interesting.
We
In
refuse
Japan,
because
we
we've
would
done it
offer
before.
yeah. In Japan, we would offer our help.
Uh-huh.
Now, here are three dilemmas. That's why it's such an important dimension. Rapport, private life versus public life, namely work, high tech, high touch. Let me focus, and then I'll give you a word to you, Jerome,
Yeah.
in the meta dilemma. Specific is the economy, diffuse is health. So health is wonderful, but you go bankrupt. And you know those discussions in your country. If you protect economic interest, like America and Brazil did, you have shareholder value for people who never share. In other words, you have a focus on making money, having but a lot of death cases. Now, the intelligent lockdown is to look at how you can combine the two. One example on my side, and Jerome, I give the word. The G-Star in the very beginning, although now a lot has been copied, is a Dutch company in denim, in fashion of denim. And in the first wave, they have within 2 weeks produced 100,000 mouse caps, very fashionable mouse caps, which is now common. But then it was new. And they sold in a weekend all 100,000 for €60 a piece. High quality, washable. Now, here it shows that reconciliation means the answer to the question, what can I do with the economy that helps us to be healthier? And what can health do to get our economic interest covered? That's the idea of dilemma reconciliation. Please, Jerome, go ahead.
Yeah, well, this is the core a bit of the foundings that we got, because if we combine the two, for instance, with the emotions that and this not emotion, but like this split between private and public life, is the the discussion everybody's got now over the table or Zoom meetings, which is how to deal with this video conferencing, how about remote work, which for some people is fantastic, because those who are task orientated, who are very specific, they find, I mean, I had discussion with a friend who works in IT, and he said, but I don't understand anyway, I work from home before, so for me it makes no difference, so it's just good. I don't need to come to the office once a week to see my boss. And on the other hand, you have some people who feel completely distressed because they say, yes, but we're working all the time, and there is no separation between private life and work life, and this can be actually difficult. And I miss this emotional bond that I have at the office. And actually, there are some studies going on with a number of companies, with managers, especially owners, so entrepreneurs who own their companies, who don't seem, there are big differences according to countries, who don't seem to accept not to see physically their employees, because, and here there's another option, there's also trust. We can correlate those answers with how much trust exists among the countries, and that of course is a big dilemma for this health economy. Yes, you've got quite a few cases now of companies who actually uh, use this crisis as a way either to do business. That's the, the examples you gave. You've got some who try to save the business. So some other fashion companies who made some mask, not necessarily expensive, but to keep some activity. And you've got some also who did that. Today, we don't know how much it was for PR purposes or whether it was really genuine. We never really know. But there are cases of LVMH, this luxury giant, who actually transformed some of its production lines of perfumes to make some gel. So you could get some gel in France that were maybe on the line of some Gucci or whatever. Enfin, it's not Gucci, but some other brands like that. And also some companies who teamed up to work on some new respirators machine when we didn't have enough at the beginning. Uh, but what is really interesting is also if you see it, if you got different clients or different friends, it works the same. Some of them working in healthcare, some doctors, and you got some people who work more into finance, and you can see those totally opposite perspectives. And both, of course, believe that they are perfectly right. That's the characteristics of culture, is that we are all very sincere in our behavior. And the doctors who we had here in Czech Republic, a minister of health, doctor, who had to resign because he was caught having a drink in a closed restaurant. At least it's not like in Belgium, but different types of scandals. But at the beginning of the crisis, he was saying that maybe we will have to close the borders for up to 2 years, and then you have the minister of economy who said, "Are you crazy? If we do that, we're all going to go without food." So
Yeah.
this is obviously the star dilemma, in my opinion. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now it shows also when we go to our work challenges. This is interesting, and building on what you just said, is do you go for deep specialism or for multidiscipline?
Mm.
And it's quite interesting. Again, those who combine are much better off. You need the depth of virologist and medicine, but you also need to involve the economist, the anthropologist, and what have you. And it's the combination of depth and breadth that makes you more successful. Another dilemma is obviously high tech and high touch, very much used in the dilemma that do we go for high tech, everything on Zoom, the banks have had that problem, or do you go high touch? And both have limitations, and we're finding out the limitations now of digital because we're overdoing it. But the blended approach shows is most effective. So ask the question, what can I do digitally that helps us deepen the relationships with our clients, with our colleagues? And what can the intimacy with our clients and our colleagues help us to use digital more effectively? Then you have the perfect combination, but do it on the basis of the right type of questions, because normally we have a fight, no, this is more important or that. You need both.
Well, so just to give us a quick example, definitely the advent of remote teaching, for instance, will change for long the introduction of remote video, and blended teaching for sure will be a new normal after the crisis.
Very much so. And it's true not only in academia, it's true in consulting, that the combination of both is very powerful. And we see great advantages of digital, for example, putting people in workshops, within 2 minutes it's done, while if you do it analog, it takes different rooms and what have you. So there are advantages, but there are also disadvantages, but we know them. The last two, very quickly. What do we do with status? Is it based on what you do or who you are? And we're almost done, by the way, in 5 minutes. Do we treat people equally, or do we treat people by positive discrimination? And with vaccines, you already are in the middle of that discussion. So crack the line. If we treat people equally, first come, first served. Right? That's it.
But then
With
you
all
got
the risks
bottleneck.
involved. Yes.
And you catch the virus while waiting.
Yes. And then we hear, sorry, you're only, this is only for under 18 or above 60, whatever. Highly selected, doesn't work either.
Yeah.
So be careful, roll the dice. Now, in the Netherlands, we had an interesting discussion between disciplines where they made a list of criteria, and this was for triage, namely if there were not enough beds, who's going to be on there. But you can translate it now to the vaccines. that there was a multidiscipline discussion. What are the criteria according to which we select people? So you combine positive discrimination with treating people equally according to those standards. Very important is how do we deal with leadership? It was the highest correlation we found, namely, do we go for judging people on what they do or judging people on who they are? Now, if you judge people on what they do, the risk is too much democracy and everybody has a word and then the decisions take too long. In the Netherlands, known as the polder model, it's consensus finding, takes very long time, too long for the crisis. Follow the leader is, very often literature focuses on crisis management is shut up and listen. No, it's not working. What works is the servant leader. The servant leader is a leader that holds the ladder for others to climb. It's a person that listens and takes decisions. That it's like a good father or a good mother. And servant leadership is the leadership model that works best in crisis. Finally, I would like to go in short term and long term, the minimal viable product. If you only go short term, then it's shoot, aim. If you go for the long term, namely, we shouldn't make mistakes. It's aim, oh, I forgot to shoot. And the minimal viable product, which I think the vaccine in a way is, because a year or in fact 2 months testing is very short, but it's good enough not to run too many risks. And the minimal viable product needs to be open to learn as quickly as possible. And finally, the highest correlation is, are we internally or externally controlled? Namely, do we fulfill our particular needs on the one hand? And sorry, this is the highest correlation. Do we learn from the outside of our world and internalize it? And what can we offer to the outside world that we have developed internally? I come to a conclusion, and that is, in view of time, use your gut feel and be aware of the tensions. Don't only rationalize. Reframe a problem as a dilemma. If I look at the talk shows, I don't know, Jérôme, in the Czech Republic or in France, but on these talk shows, you get one person saying, oh, the hospitals are full and we have to be careful. Then there is an economist, oh, all the business is going down the drain. But nobody says, hey, it's a dilemma. Should we not ask the question, what can you do with his health problem that helps the economy and vice versa? Reframe a problem as a dilemma. Instead of emphasizing conflict, ask those questions. What can I do with X that improves Y and vice versa? Take it into a broader realm, not only on your little thing, and intervene only in areas you can control. Don't do dilemmas of others. What can you do as an individual? And I would like to leave it here, Jérôme, because after you, I will just say where we're going to in the next phase. Jérôme.
Yeah, well, a couple of extra examples. The minimum viable product is, of course, these vaccines. After some countries, some companies have announced before full testing, but nevertheless, the idea of having a lot of efforts, combining the resources of a lot of companies that usually don't necessarily work together and the state together proved to be relatively good. We will probably not reach a situation that will be 100% perfect, and we can be sure to hear a lot of haters for that. But overall, it's quite positive to see how we were able to use this sort of systematic work that we've got everywhere, how to make vaccines, which is not exactly a new science, and with this sense of emergency to create a minimum viable product, which is the vaccine for now, and we will make adjustment on the way. And we've got also less dramatic, but still linked with the COVID, all those applications on telephones to track COVID, and we've seen that there were all kind of different techniques available at the beginning. And now in many countries, we have some rather smart applications that kind of track where you go with keeping, of course, some sensitive information, not to relate with your personal data, but is enabling you to know if you had come across some people that were sick, which is a good combination, a good reconciliation also of privacy versus public life.
Very good. Jerome, just some information about where we're going now. These are the 4 steps.
Yep.
Is that the pandemic has now shown the need for new ways of working. And we have a new tool, which is, by the way, available for free, and we'll give you the way of how to get there very soon, that looks in the dilemmas in 4 areas. Culture, your organizational culture, because this is the same research, but not applied to society, but to your organization. Design, namely physical design, plexiglass, and what have you, process and technology. So examples of those are you rather a top-down or bottom-up, and how have you dealt with it? In other words, have you a leader that is servant? Design, fixed versus flexible, process, in-office versus anywhere, and technology, high-tech and high-touch. And what we do with this research, this survey, is to look at what are the dilemmas your people are saying about your company rather than about your society, and where do you need to work on. And the end result, we really worked on the graphics, are things like this, where obviously, and this is current and ideal, where the biggest gap are shown. And this is even new for you because we just, Jérôme, because we just developed this last Monday. It looks at these kind of scoring principles. And another one where current and ideal is very close, so don't work too much on technology for this organization and process. And we have obviously everything we discussed captured in the COVID-19 survival guide. It's also available in French. By the way, it's available in 12 languages. So I hope this will do for the moment. What I would like to ask you, are there any burning questions, or Magda, have you found some in the chat box?
There aren't burning questions, but there are some questions. The most recent one was asking about polarities model from Barry Johnson, and just mentioning that there's a lot of similarity or congruence there, which totally makes sense because you're looking at.
Yeah, no, very much so. And we love the work of Barry Johnson. For me, at least, when I was reading Barry Johnson 30 years ago, the big signal was an infinity loop. And it looks more like a vicious circle. You go from negative to positive of the other side, then negative, and then positive on the other side. But it should become a helix. Now, in the later work of Barry Johnson, and a helix, namely, is that you're progressing rather than caught in that infinity loop. That's for the cynical. And for the old people say, I've seen this all happening before. Yeah. Barry Johnson, in terms of getting to the next level of integration so that the infinity loop goes up, would be only my comment, but really respectful of his work.
Yeah, he's awesome. Someone's asking about the guide, so just use the QR code on the screen. Use your phone, take a picture, and it'll take you to get the guide. Question for Jérôme earlier, what was it? Regarding the question of trust and Jérôme's point on employers don't accept not seeing their employees. Can you explore the reconciliation on this a bit further?
Well, it's a bit, we have a bit short on time for that. It's a vast topic, but yes, it's true. It's true that actually the crisis definitely has has exposed the concept of trust to people who were not really seeing it. And trust is often a concept that is not purely cultural, but we realize it has all the definition of culture, because we realize it when we are out of it. And yes, some managers are probably going back to their textbook to learn how to create trust with their teams remotely. And probably, I mean, I know it's maybe not a very complicated answer, but there is probably room for trainings and coaching right now to teach managers to relearn how to create trust with their team.
Mm.
That exposed this issue definitely.
Yeah. Magda, may I take the trust issue and make it a dilemma?
Yeah.
So if you are a mother or a father and you always trust your people, you're naive. Yeah? So the best way to increase trust is to control. And there can be very soft control mechanisms. So the dilemma is trust versus control. And one way of reconciling it is to deal with principles. Yeah? And we call that the sandbox. So you say, you know, you have all the freedom, dear child, to play in the sandbox, but don't go out of it, right? And so on the one hand, you control on the boundaries, where you give them complete freedom in the sandbox. You will see that almost with any topic, you can rephrase it as a dilemma. It's a bit, another example I love is, you know, the American literature said about 10 years ago, and I Googled it, that the most quoted competence of a leader is to have courage, yeah, which in Europe means you're an idiot, as we have found many around the globe that have courage and therefore they're idiots. So now the most quoted competence of a leader is caution. Yeah? Now I have good news for you. Courage without caution, you're reckless. And caution without courage, you're a coward, and both don't work. What you need is to say, where do I need to be cautious that can increase my courageousness? Yeah. And a beautiful example is Cirque du Soleil, where the people in the trapeze didn't want to take more risk. And so the people said, but are they lacking courage? Then I heard this, by the way, from a non-executive director of, they made them, the people in the trapeze, head of the safety nets. And when they trusted the safety nets, they took more risks. So caution helps you to be more courageous. But to do it without safety nets is very stupid. Yeah. So again, the issue of trust, combine it with control, and you're in great shape.
I like it. There's another question. I apologize if you said it actually and I missed it, but someone was asking about the percentage of people who were from countries, respondents from countrysides versus metro areas. And when they asked that, actually what came up for me was, you know, I was raised in a small village in Poland, literally like 30 minutes to the next, by bus, to the next city. And I moved to America when I was 12 to Chicago Metro. And I've lived and worked all over the world. So a lot of times, like as you were going through a presentation, you would say one thing and I'd be like, oh yeah, that resonates. And then you would say the complete opposite. I'm like, oh yeah, that resonates too. And I just started thinking about, you know, how much of a cultural mutt I am. And anyway, when the countryside thing came up too, I'm like, huh, I do have some sensibilities that are more country and then others that are more city. Anyway, it's fascinating.
Mark, for me, there are two reasons why you recognize all this. Not you, but we as human beings. First of all the dilemmas are in us. You know, take the car accident, all dilemmas, everybody wants to help friends and everybody has something with the rule. It's our culture that amplifies one value over the other. Yeah, and that's the same, by the way, with Myers-Briggs. I like to be cynical and provocative, but it is what is amplified. What is your preference? But if you're in the world of clapping, the preference of your right or left hand becomes irrelevant because it's about clapping. So one reason is all the opposites are in ourselves. And the second one, you're quite right. Rural versus city life, urban, is, hey, I recognize both within Poland or within America. True. But it could be applied to male, female. I say, oh, specific and diffuse. Yeah, men are, straight to the point. And what is the goal? Deborah Tannen wrote about that. You just don't understand about, and she writes that a man walks to the fridge, takes a Coke, and his wife says, honey, what are you doing? Oh, I'm thirsty, I'm taking a Coke. And then she says, but couldn't you ask me if I'm thirsty? Oh, sorry, dear, I forgot. Are you thirsty? She says, no, I'm not. Yeah, typically for a man to say, shut up if you're not thirsty, because we are specific. I'm thirsty, I take a Coke. But in this case, now I'm quoting Deborah Tannen, it is about the relationship. It's about the whole thing, not only your thirst, right? And so many of these models can be applied to many diverse type of environments.
If I can rebound on what you said, Magda, because I've got almost the exact opposite experience. I was born in Paris and lived in San Francisco and Moscow, and now I live in a 1,500 inhabitants village. So you see, it's I also resounds to what you say. And actually, this to answer the question earlier about the city life versus the country life. There is, of course, a cultural difference here, which is often associated with the individualism and communitarism. We have the same type of discussions with individual freedom of lifestyle that we find in big cities, with this sort of yes, but in small towns we help each other, but we are more intrusive with all the rumors and so on going on, which we find again with the COVID, with, for instance, those applications that are, yes, very useful to track the disease, but also very intrusive in individuals' rights. So we find indeed some parallels. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Magda, we have still some time, but I don't want to make a mess out of the schedules of others. But are there other questions you think are need to be answered?
I don't think so. I think we're in pretty good shape. Yeah, this is, fascinating, obviously. So I think if other questions come up, everybody knows how to reach me. Please pass on those questions, email them, and I will do my best to convince our two speakers to hopefully answer them.
We will.
Yeah, with pleasure.
We have a question come up just now. Sorry. Sterling's asking, what would be an example of reconciling with the age demographics?
Amongst the age groups.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Now, rather than saying that's the reconciliation, it's a process answer. That's very often what consultants do when they don't know the answer, is have a reconciling workshop type. We do many of them. We have a 6-step approach to dilemma reconciliation, but the importance is that you have this dialogue between the different age groups in finding a reconciliation together, rather than a consultant saying, this is the reconciliation, right? So my answer is a process answer. Get the different age groups together. It's a bit what, as a metaphor, what the doctors, the medical specialists did in the Netherlands by inviting the anthropologists, the economists, and what have you, by having a dilemma reconciliation type of meeting where the outcome was what pleases us all. And sometimes it was making a choice, because not everything is a dilemma. And sometimes it meant, oh, but that's a creative solution. So I hope that's an answer.
Well, if I can add an extra,
Please.
not COVID related, but I know in several countries this is happening. Though I find that always fascinating project of setting up some kindergarten, daycare inside some pension houses for old people. I've seen a couple of times this type of things, And this is really the perfect reconciliation, the win-win. You've got all those old people who are so happy to see young faces, and those kids who are great having many new grandpas and grandmas around them. And this is a very creative and successful way of reconciling age cohorts.
Very, very nice. And by the way, Magda, we are a small company, but we always have 3 or 4 interns here. And to be honest, I think they like our experience, and I love their creativity. So in other words, although it's not yet kindergarten and a retirement house, but we're getting close. We're getting close. But it's wonderful. It gives such a pleasure to work with these young people.
I love that example. I wish that there was more of that. Actually, my side note, my dream is to do something like that, but with animals. I want to have a series of, but at least one shelter for abused and abandoned animals, and have it coordinated both with schools and with old folks' homes, so people can have animal therapy and the animals can have all the love they need. Anyway.
Wonderful, wonderful.
So let's finish up on this bright note. Thank you so much for taking a little bit longer than the 60 minutes we allotted. It was definitely worthwhile. I did put the link to to purchase the guide. I think it's on Amazon in the chat. So I'll put it again in case someone missed it. And if you are watching this later or listening to this later on our podcast, please check your episode notes, your video notes, and you'll see the link in there as well. So thank you so much, Jérôme and Fons. You guys are lovely. The information is interesting.
Thank you very much.
People need to listen to this and read it, because I think it's challenging thinking. This is very much, I think, everybody should be understanding this. I think we would be able to live a lot happier and solve problems other than COVID as well if we just stopped being, on the opposite ends.
Politics in your country, at least where you are now, Magda, is a good example. If 2 political parties can't even talk to each other, it's awful. It's the beauty of having more parties, by the way. In the Netherlands, we have 16, perhaps a bit too much or too many.
Or in Poland, though, we have a lot of parties too, and that's not a great situation. So let's end on a happier note.
So we need to work hard.
Wonderful.
My gardening shoes.
Yeah, we're a bit Dutch anyway.
Wonderful.
All right, well.
Thanks, everyone. And I will see you all here at next Wednesday for our regular webinar series. So we are always doing a webinar on Wednesdays at 9 p.m. India time. So hopefully I'll see you guys there. And if not, lovely to see you here today. Thank you again, Fons and Jérôme, and everyone have a lovely day.
All right.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.